April 26th board meeting. We will start off with the Pledge of Allegiance led by Connie Hennessy. Ready? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you, Connie. Next, we will move on to land acknowledgement by Corey McKenna.
I acknowledge that the geographical region of Camas is located on the ancestral and territorial lands of the Chinook and Cowlitz people, and that the Chinook are still fighting to be a federally recognized tribe on their own land.
Thank you, Corey. And I forgot to mention, for those of you joining us today, we're trying to use technology, so please bear with us as we work through this today. We'll next move on to item number 3, open and effective communications. We're going to have a presentation by Sarah Fox. You're good to go, Sarah. We're ready for you now, Sarah.
The meeting starts at 5:30? Okay.
And we're ready for you.
I can't see anybody else.
Yeah, let her know she won't be able to see anybody.
You ready for us to start our presentation?
We are, Sarah, but you won't be able to see anybody.
I can't hear you, Dale. I'm sorry.
We're ready for you. Can you hear? And unfortunately, you won't be able to see anybody in the room.
Hi, I'm Sarah Fox. I work for the city of Camas, and I have with me Melissa Meiden from Mosaic Consulting, and we're here to talk to you about the Camas Housing Action Plan that we've been working on since, we got delayed. We were supposed to start in March, but we started in August. And we'll just give you about a 10-15 minute overview of where we are today, and then we're looking forward to hearing some of your thoughts, and we'll go from there. I'll let Melissa take over.
Thanks, Sarah. I have some slides. It doesn't look like I'm able to share my screen, but I can also just talk through them if that works.
Looks like I can share screen, but I have to pull the slide presentation.
It's there. Click on that. And then go to multiple partners.
Either way, I can just do it verbally. Okay.
Give her the thumbs up.
Is that okay, Sarah? Or are you
Sure, or I can bring it up.
Yeah.
I'll just walk everyone through it. Okay.
Thanks. Well, thanks for having us tonight and giving us a chance to share with you about the housing action plan that we've been working on. Kind of a quick overview of this project. It's something that the City of Camas received a grant from the Washington State Department of Commerce for. And cities and counties throughout the state are working on housing action plans similar to this, designed to encourage greater housing diversity, improve affordability, and improve access to opportunity for people of all incomes. And this plan really fits within the housing goals that the city's comprehensive plan outlined. So that plan identified housing diversity and access for people of all incomes, and particularly housing for folks with special needs, so seniors or people with disabilities. Those are some of the goals that the comp plan outlines. And then the housing action plan will take them a little further and develop strategies that the city is going to look at for improving housing options here. Like Sarah mentioned, we began in August and did community engagement activities and kind of an existing conditions review throughout the fall of last year. And then moved into developing an action plan at the end of last year, beginning of this year, that has now been presented and refined to the city, to the planning commission, and to public stakeholders and residents. So we're really in that last phase of finalizing that and having it up for adoption by the city council by July of this year.
And just wanted to say I'm really grateful to the school district for partnering with us on getting the outreach for this project out by allowing us to put some updates in the school newsletters to the families throughout this entire project has been wonderful. And we also had a nice partnership with one of the classrooms of high school students as well, so that's been really nice.
So certainly we have a pretty large document that outlines a lot of the research that came out of this housing action plan. You can go there. It's on the project website at letstalkcampushousing.us. So if that's something that interests you, definitely please check that out. You can also see results of all that outreach that the school district helps promote. Results of the survey, things like that are available in that document. But tonight I wanted to hit pretty quickly on some of the goals that came out of that research, and then some different types of strategies that the city is looking at for the next several years. So we identified 4 main goals through that quantitative and qualitative research done throughout the fall. The first is to continue developing housing to accommodate growth. We know based on the city's comprehensive plan that there is continued growth projected over the next 20 years and that the city will need housing to accommodate new households expected to move in. We also have as a goal to diversify the housing mix. So over the past several years, most new development in Canada has been single-family homes. Typically, homes, definitely the large majority greater than 2,000 square feet, many greater than 3,000 square feet. So pretty big single-family homes. But we heard from folks throughout the engagement and through the data that we looked at that there would be a need for some different types of housing besides just single-family homes. So some smaller housing types like cottage clusters, duplex or triplex, multi-family housing, some different types of units that are kind of related to goal 3, perhaps can be more affordable, but also might offer different physical qualities that people are looking for. So, for example, we heard from several folks, or many folks through the survey, that there's a need for smaller single-story properties that seniors might be interested in. So, even if someone is able to afford a larger home, that might not be what they're looking for now. So, we have as a goal there diversifying the housing mix. And then we also heard from people in the city and from looking at data that there is a need to address housing affordability. Housing within Camas, both on the for sale and rental side, is pretty expensive. That's probably not a surprise to anyone living or working there. And a good share of the population, I want to say about a quarter or so, are having difficulty affording housing. So that's something that we would have some strategies to address. And then finally, where there is existing housing in the city that is affordable, looking at strategies strategies to preserve that. So the first group that we identified are strategies related to zoning. So things like updating density and lot or dimensional standards for some of the zoning districts in order to make sure that the types of housing the city is looking for are allowed to be built within their zoning recommendations. We also looked at opportunities to allow new housing types in some of the residential zones. For example, things like cottage clusters, duplex or triplexes, row houses, looking at opportunities to make them possible by right within different zoning districts, rather than something that would have to need additional approval from the city. Particularly in terms of row houses in mixed use and downtown commercial districts, trying to expand the opportunities for those types of housing there. And then finally, we talked about focusing on key areas in the city with residential potential. Particularly, a lot of that vacant, buildable residential land is in the north part of the city, north of the lake. So focusing on larger properties there that might have potential for rezoning or more detailed plans for the property to make sure that they are identified or that the type of housing the city would like to see is buildable on the property. Another strategy that we've been discussing is that of developing an inclusionary housing policy. So these policies are ones that either require or encourage developers to include affordable housing as some share of units in their development. So, for example, if a developer was looking at building let's say 50 housing units, and the city had a policy that required that 10% of them be affordable, that would be 5 affordable housing units there. These can be, there's really a variety of types of inclusionary policies that are in place throughout the country. They can be something that's mandatory, like I mentioned, or something that's voluntary. So maybe developers who build some share of units as affordable are getting some other break, some incentive for them to do that. The city already has an inclusionary policy in its multifamily tax exemption program. So in certain areas within the city, if developers include some units as affordable, they can get a tax exemption going forward for that residential portion of their project. So looking at options to bolster that or try other inclusionary housing approaches would fall under this strategy. Then we also talked about some strategies related to communication. So developing community conversations around housing and the idea of housing for all or housing affordability. Why does this matter in Canada? And that could be things like meetings like this, or we talked about perhaps a speaker series through the library, just looking for opportunities to keep this kind of momentum from this plan going and continue to do educational efforts around housing here. We also talked about taking the opportunity to build new partnerships and look at opportunities for different funding strategies. So building connections with affordable housing developers who work on properties for families or seniors, seeing if there are there places in Canvas where there are some interest from affordable housing developers. If not, what kind of barriers are there? How can the city address those? Kind of making some of those initial inroads. Then also looking at opportunities for affordable homeownership and making sure that the city is capitalizing capitalizing on available affordable housing funding sources as they come up. For example, the grant that funded this project is something the city was able to take advantage of when it was available. So certainly continue to look for opportunities like that and be ready to capitalize on them when they do come up. This is a pretty quick overview of everything, but we would definitely encourage you to check out the website for the project, where you can download drafts of the plan and look at videos of other community meetings that we've had. And that, again, is letstalkcamushousing.us. And thanks again for the time tonight. I think, do you have time for questions as well?
Can you guys hear me? Oh, can you guys hear me? Thank you. Or
We don't stand and we can't see you guys.
thank you for your presentation. I don't know if the board has any questions. We'll definitely check out the website, and thank you guys for being here today, and we appreciate the partnership with the
We're
city
still
also.
in the meeting. I'd ask for feedback, if not tonight, but if you could email me at sfox@cityofcamas.us with some of your thoughts on other strategies to increase housing diversity and affordability, and particularly any considerations around concerns for your school, for the school district, school district population, and that, and also any ideas on affordability around funding, impact fees and whatnot. You know, Planning Commission brought up some interest in taking a closer look at the city's impact fees, and so maybe the school district might also have some ideas around impact fees for schools as well.
Thank you very much, Sarah. We appreciate both of your time, and if we have any questions, we'll send them to you.
Yeah, I think we can just stop that part of the meeting.
Okay, sorry for our technical difficulties, but we're working on stuff. So, with that, we will move on to item number 4, board communications. If any of you guys have any things you guys want to discuss or things you've been up to this past 2 weeks. Anyone? Yeah?
Yes, I had the opportunity to sit in on the Camas Equity Forum. I guess that's now been on 2 weeks ago. Again, a wonderful group of individuals who had a chance to again refine and participate in the focus. It looked specifically at AI and island peoples. Very, very enlightening, great speakers, always. It was well attended and lots of participation. And then had a chance to participate in kind of the departure of Chuck Stiller on behalf of the board, and send him on his way to go out and do things, tidy and organize, a nice opportunity for us to get together and recognize his role there in the school district. And again, his fingerprints are all over things. Well, as much as he's had his fingers on half the project that others on for staff. That's really about the extent of it thus far.
Did I get it? You got it. I got it. I'm on. I also attended the Equity Forum, focusing on Asian American Pacific Islanders, which was really awesome to hear from some of our students and some of our community members, and it was a really engaging conversation. Also, I was able to attend the Schools Advisory Committee, which is a county-wide committee that meets these days about twice a year. It's supposed to be like once a quarter. We're meeting again in December of 2021. And it was a lot. I know I couldn't make it, and there are some things that I know are super relevant and important
to her line of work that probably a little bit went over my head. But it was a good discussion with both the superintendents and board members and city council members and planning commission members, and I don't know, at some point, how do you want to touch on what your name came up on? You're on a committee of some sort. I don't know if you knew that. I don't know if you want to talk about it right now, but at a later point.
Similar to Sarah was just talking about the city of Camas, Clark County is also counted. Okay?
Yeah, sorry.
Okay, so in addition, Sarah Fox was just talking about the city of Camas having a housing panel. There's a similar panel going on with Clark County. And I'm representing schools on that panel. So that we're trying to, again, try and help the affordability of housing in Clark County. And it's for the urban area in Clark County, so it's the unincorporated Vancouver urban area.
Right.
So that's one thing. And then the second thing, 6 school districts, Camas is one of them, are trying to extend our capital facilities plan update to 2022 instead of 2021, and that county is going to look at that on June 1st. So those are the 2 items.
Thank you. Thank you. That's really nice update. Thank you, Heidi, for jogging my memory. I, too, attended, we're not used to this, right? Check. I too, attended the equity forum and want to really, I want to thank the panelists who made it powerful, especially Kate, our high school student, who gave us a lot to think about when she posed to all of us attending about how we can support students in our schools. And it really provided a great conversation. So I always appreciate those, but this one was really powerful. Deb and I went to a city schools meeting earlier this afternoon. Just a few things that I know will be coming out of our city, but I always like to get on my calendar early. June 14th, it sounds like they'll be having a town hall. So I like to put those things on my calendar, and we'll share that. But also, to piggyback Sarah's presentation tonight, we heard that there's more housing developments this year than almost any year that Phil's been working here in the past 20 years. So growth in our community, more than ever. So good to know. Also, I know we'll be talking about fall planning, but I noticed some universities came out recently expecting vaccinations from students and from staff that they want their fall to look like the experiences we've had in the past. And I think that's interesting, and that universities are able to do that. And I know that we want fall to be the experiences for connections for students and teachers that we want. So we'll be talking later about that. And that's what I've been up to.
I don't have a whole lot really to add to that. I also attended Great Equity Forum. I think it was one of our better attended ones. And those are always, they're a good shot in the arm. And the conversations that we have there, the information we hear, the stories we hear, always powerful. I don't really have that much else to add. We have a policy review. Connie and I do have a policy review meeting on Wednesday, so we'll have some updated recommendations for policy to bring to you at the next board meeting.
And I don't really have much to update. I missed the equity meeting. Since sports started back up, I feel like I'm dragging my kids to sports all the time after school, which I love, so I'm not complaining about it, but I missed a few more of those things since that happened. Connie, did you ever go back? I haven't go back. Okay, back to Connie.
Sorry, quick go back. I just wanted to thank Dr. Williams and the Equity Committee for putting together such awesome forum. I know there's a lot of work that goes into it and planning, and I really appreciate appreciate it. And seeing the outpouring of support from the people who attended, when Kate said, you know, hey, think about how you can support us, and the chat just blew up like, what do you need? We've got it. Tell us how to donate, whatever. So thank you for providing that.
Okay, are you going to go back? Okay. All right, we are done with board communication then, and we will move on to item 5, which is public comment. I will read this. It just says, the board uses the public comment period as an opportunity to listen to citizen concerns, positions on issues, and programs. Each person providing public comment will hold 3 minutes. Once called upon, please state your name, address, and the spelling of your last name for the record. The board may only discuss and act upon items included on the written agenda. For that reason, board members cannot respond to any comments or questions during public comment. Please be aware that disrespectful comments or comments of a personal nature directed at an individual, either by name or in reference, will not be allowed. Personal concerns should be first directed to the building principal, then to the superintendent, and finally, in writing to the board. I know we have no written public comment tonight, but if there are anyone in the audience tonight that would like to do public comment, we would welcome you to do so. Hello, my name is Mindy O'Neill. Sorry to retreat you. And my address is 3021 Northwest Grass Valley Drive in Canada. My last name is O''Neil. My time's going. Okay, I had to cut this short to make 3 minutes. So, first of all, I just want to say thank you for the opportunity of being here and your diligent work in proceeding with this school year. I know firsthand, as the president of the Camas Washougal Co-op Preschool, just what the stresses have included to make it through this school year. I also know, because of this role, that our young children need to be unmasked. I have 82 preschoolers, ages 2 through 5, who have attended in person since September. We do not tell them to distance, and they do not wear masks. And I can tell you how many of them have been diagnosed with COVID. None. Not one single student, nor teacher. None. We all know that young children are not being affected by this virus. They aren't. And currently, I'm not even allowed in my child's school, which is an issue all its own. But it makes me wonder even more why my 8-year-old is spending 7 hours a day in a mask that hinders his breathing. He and his friends cannot play soccer at recess because it's too hard to breathe while we're running, Mommy. Outside, my 2nd grader cannot play like an 8-year-old boy because we have handed him a burden that he does not deserve. They do not need to be in masks. This same child is now, due to his pediatrician's orders, wearing hydrocortisone under his eye every morning before school. Turns out, this is one of many side effects of children wearing a mask for 7 hours a day. Ponder this. What would have happened had I sent my child to school 18 months ago with his nose and mouth covered for 7 hours every day? Because I have a sneaking suspicion that more than one mandatory reporter would have taken notice of my parenting tactics. The CDC itself says masks can be worn when distancing isn't possible. That they may help slow the spread of COVID. So which is it? Because I know for a fact that our students are being taught to stay 6 feet apart from each other. So why are they in masks as well? It just doesn't make sense. You have all been elected to make choices on behalf of us, the parents and the taxpayers of this district. Decisions that are in our children's best interest. But I'm sorry to say, it feels like you're dropping the ball. When I kiss my son goodbye every morning and send him off while hushed in a mask, where he can't see anyone smile at him to welcome him to school, where he can't smile at his friends, it's wrong. In a world where we are all pretending to be so worried about children's socio-emotional health, I wonder how this topic is being ignored. What we're doing to these little innocent children, the message of fear we're sending to them while masking them at school, is wrong. And I'm calling on all of you to do the right thing and unmask our babies. It's been a year.
please let them just go back to being kids.
Thank you. Is there anyone else who would like to give any public comment tonight? Okay, thank you very much. We will next move on to item 6. Has everyone seen the items added to the consent agenda? With that, I will take a motion on the consent agenda.
I make a motion for the consent agenda approval.
I'll second.
I don't know if I'm going to do a roll call vote, all right, so, all in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Okay, that was unanimous, thank you. Okay, next, we'll move on to item 8, the reopening plan. We'll start with the timeline and Dr. Snell.
Thanks, Tracy. Can you take us through the slides there? Many of these slides, as we've discussed in each board meeting, are just an update from previous slides, and we've kind of built this narrative throughout this journey we've been on. The one highlight on this timeline is that June 1st is our learning recovery plan due to OSPI, which you guys will need to approve. It's looking at the summer opportunities that we provide to students, and so Lisa Griffith and team will be starting those presentations in May to work towards a hopeful approval and your feedback at that second meeting of May. First is a slide that actually the Dorothy Fox PTA somebody put together of Dr. Sork, and sent it in Kathy passed along to us. I know our principals feel like this a lot, that it's fine, we're going to plan around it, and it's been a year of a lot of planning, so I thought I'd share that with you. We can go through these slides quickly. These are the ones that we've had throughout: guiding principles, decision-making rationale. The definitions, this is something that right now we're all in person with the remote learning option, and so we've worked through small group and hybrid, and that's the status that we're at now, 4 full days for all of our students. We've talked about when do we transition and the guidance that we received and your decision-making around that. Currently we're in the moderate level, and so the activities that are written as recommended from DOH are included in that level. And then this has been our timeline going back to the summer of 2020, and here we are, April, almost done with that, and the numbers of students that we were serving in person, and where we're at currently now. You can see about 85% of our elementary families are choosing to have their students in person, really similar at the middle school level, and at the high school level we're about 70%. So just in talking with Clark County Public Health today, unfortunately our rates jumped again. So we're in the 190s now for Clark County. That doesn't change our status, although we are starting to approach leaving the moderate level. So it's something that I know that we've been talking about having to monitor and hoping that that would be the case. But you can see those trends since March 15th that we've definitely continued to increase the rates in the county. So one of the things that we've been doing in addition to those county rates is tracking our own rates within the district. That's phenomenal, the 0 cases at the preschool from our public comment. We've had 2 cases, 2 transmissions on site. Remember, that's called an outbreak, but outbreak kind of signifies something, at least from movies and stuff, that it's a lot more transmission. By definition from public health, that means somebody's linked a case to somebody else on the school site, and that's happened once, student to staff member, and one staff member to staff member. Overall, we're starting to put in our positive rates, just because the transmissions aren't happening. Obviously, there's more and more cases in the community, and so you can see our numbers here, the percent of students who have had a positive at each level, and not surprisingly, our high school students have the highest student rate, and then at the staff level for each of the respective levels again with positive. So we're going to continue to provide that information to you, because as rates climb, you guys may have a difficult decision again about, do we stay 4 days a week or do we transition back to hybrid. So we want to provide you all the information that you need for that. One of the big changes right now is contact tracing. So 6 to 3 feet guidance changed, back in March, and we made the decision to move to 4 days a week. Started that at the secondary level. For the most part, at the elementary level, we continue to keep 6-foot distancing. So it really hasn't changed our contact tracing. It's dramatically changed at the secondary level, though, because we are within 6 feet. And for public health, when we go through that process, anybody who's spent more than 15 minutes time with somebody who is a confirmed case or a probable case, then we have to identify them as a close contact, and then we have to quarantine them. So just to give you perspective, last week at Camas High School we had 2 cases. That's not atypical. Normally when we have 2 cases, we maybe have 2 to 3 close contacts. Those are often siblings or people who have been with that person outside of school. Last week we had 28 close contacts. And so you can imagine having that conversation 28 times with parents, trying to explain why their student is a close contact and what does that mean and all the process for that. So it's very time intensive and it's very stressful for families. Students who are excited to get back are now quarantined, and we have to follow the public health guidance on that and the timeline. So it's just really, really challenging. And so we want to bring that to your attention. You're going to hear about it, I'm sure, as we continue on this. One thing that we can do is vaccinations, because when you are vaccinated, if you're a close contact, you do not have to quarantine unless you have symptoms. And so there's definitely a benefit to being vaccinated as a staff member and as a young adult. And so happy to answer any questions about contact tracing, but that has been all consuming in the last couple of weeks. Okay, there you go. So we brought this slide up a month ago when we were making the move, and we talked about what happens if rates go up and what do we need to do about that. And so we had talked about approaching 200, which we have been. We talked about right around 200, which apparently tomorrow we might be when those rates are released. And then when we go beyond 200, the need to reevaluate the situation. Obviously, we're heading to the end of the school year. You saw the number of transmissions that are happening on our school site. So there's a lot of data just beyond the rate for 14 days. The state also uses test positivity and hospitalization rates. Both of those are pretty good factors right now in Clark County. They will assess the region again May 3rd, and they look at the data currently to make that assessment, and then the governor says you're in phase 2, phase 3, or whatever. The last time Cowlitz County moved to phase 2, and we stayed in phase 3. Phase 3 is the better phase in terms of being reopened. And it looks like we'll sneak in, staying at phase 3 for the next session, according to Dr. Melnick and Krager today, but it's going to be close. And so it feels like we're kind of in this limbo area of trying to get through the end of the school year, trying to manage this, make sure everybody's safe, all these factors. And so as of right now, there isn't any staff recommendation to do anything differently, but we want to keep you in the loop and make sure you have data that you need to make decisions if needed. So, yeah, Doug?
The transmission rate at 10%, do you have any data on that? Obviously, the number per 100,000 is climbing. Do you have anything on that 10%, where we are relative to the threshold?
Yeah, that is actually the hospitalization rate number.
Okay.
And so that factor, I believe we were at 4.7% perhaps, but I'm just going off of memory right now. Typically we haven't pulled those numbers into this report because they're a little more tricky to find. And then we just published the rate per 100,000, because that one's really easy to find and not be, I guess it depends on what site you go to on some of those other sites, those other data points. And so I can provide where we're at tomorrow when it's actually released to the board, so you guys know where we're at with those indicators as well.
It sounds like we're about halfway.
And I want to say the test positivity in the last update on Clark County Public Health site was right around 5%. So there's test positivity, hospitalization, and then the rate per 100,000 are the big 3 that we're pulling from Clark County Public Health. Okay. So I'm going to go fairly quickly through these slides. These are our every 2-week countermeasure survey. So just checking in with staff to make sure that all the procedures that we're required to put in place, that we're following them. And we've been doing this now for since February. One of the questions that we started asking though was about vaccinations. We can't require vaccinations on the site at this point, and so it's a little difficult to track like who's been vaccinated or not. So what we've been doing is asking staff who complete the survey, and it just gives us a ballpark of what's going on. And so you can see that we had 398 staff that were reporting having their first or second shot of the vaccine in this last cycle. So it's up from the last time. We're getting 450 people participating in the survey. We have about 1,000 employees, but many of those are not full-time employees, and so they may not be as inclined to take the survey. The other part that we've tried to add to our countermeasure program is the testing process of screening that we've been doing, so employees can have a screening test. And then we've also started the diagnostic screening option. So if somebody has symptoms, they go to the health room. If their parent would like it, then we can do a test right there and send it to a lab instead of them having to go to some facility in Clark County. So it just tries to save a step for parents. If, you know, your kid's sick, it's one, and then you got to go to the clinic and all that stuff. So we're excited about bringing those options on and think that they'll help us in our countermeasures. The next, if you can keep going one more time. So these are a series of all the slides from the questions over time, where people rated them and what's happening. So I'm not going to go through each slide because we've done that a lot over the past 2 months. But just know that they're a resource for you here. So Gail, if you can just go quickly through all the data points, and then the board or the public can look at them more in depth. And at this point, I'll turn it over to Mr. Hood for an elementary update.
Thank you. So as far as elementary, if you want to get to the next slide, as Dr. Snell had said, even though we can go to 3 feet in our classrooms from student to student, those classrooms are staying at 6 feet just because of the contact tracing that Dr. Snell talked about at the high school level, so that if there is a case within a classroom, it's only impacting a certain amount of students at the 6 feet versus if we're at 3 feet, then it's more students that are impacted that way. So one of the great things, though, is celebrations at the end of the year, and we're talking about that this year, which is so exciting. And so in the principal meeting last week, we're talking about what does it look like to do a 5th grade celebration. We didn't get to last year, obviously, when students didn't get to. What could that look like in a safe way? And it's going to be tied with the county phase that we are in. And so what Dr. Snell talked about is really important. Right now, principals are looking at, okay, at phase 3, this is what it could look like. This is how many people we can have, including our students. The number always includes the students. If we're in phase 2, obviously the number drops to how many people can be there and be present. And so we're hoping, fingers crossed, that we're in phase 3 for that. Also, field day for those of you that are involved with elementaries, that's a big darn deal as well. So we're talking about those things. What does it look like? It's not going to look exactly the way it did, but let's figure out how we can do this in a safe way. And so, you know, it's one of those things that was a great shining moment last week where we started talking about some things and saying, how can we do this and provide those experiences for our students and our staff. So good things, and again, we're keeping our fingers crossed that we're in phase 3 in the county. Any questions?
Thank you, and I have a quick update as well, Gail. So at the secondary level, thank you first of all just for the clarification that we were able to give staff around what 3-foot distancing looked like. We mirrored our practice for 6-foot distancing, and it just made things a lot smoother in terms of helping us to get our secondary students in school 4 days per week. We are continuing to manage contact tracing, as Jeff alluded to earlier, just how those 2 cases now have ballooned up to 28 close contacts and having to navigate that. But the teams are doing really well in terms of staying on top of it right now. And our exciting news is preparing for our premier event each year, which is graduation. We're so excited about that. But in this case, we are looking at 3 possible scenarios, right? A phase 1 graduation, a phase 2 graduation, or a phase 3. The teams have done some work surveying families and students about, well, what would be your preference in terms of, in-person graduation? Do we want to break it into 2 so we have more room? Those kinds of things. But, just like our community does, they want everyone together if possible so we can celebrate and see each other if the phase allows. And so that's where we are with the secondary. We'll give you more details as we get our graduation plans refined. You go back one slide. No, yeah. So the other piece, just to cue you guys up, I know that we've been talking a lot about the spring, but we really want to let our parents know what's the plan for the fall, sooner than later. And so, we have heard loud and clear from you that we need to continue a remote learning option for students, and so we will have K-12 Connect Academy as a viable option for any family that isn't comfortable or isn't able to return to school. And then at this point, we're thinking that we should be planning for 5 days of instruction and figuring out what that looks like. And probably, as we learned this year, having the ability to pivot based on whatever guidance is coming out. I think it's been really important for you guys to try to help us give you, where are your decision-making powers, as we heard from tonight, eloquently stated in the public comment. There are some places that you do have the authority, and then there's other places that you do not. And so as we go through the summer, really trying to frame for you as a school board, what is it that we need direction on, that you have flexibility and that you can make that determination, and where is it that the Department of Health or the labor and industry standards are saying that we have to do it this way? Because sometimes you may say we want it this way, but then we have to figure out, given LMI standards or whatever, how do we make that work? And does that mean we need more spaces? Does that mean we need more staff? Or whatever it is. So I would like to really have those conversations in depth in May so that we can send staff and families off after the end of this school year, kind of knowing what to expect and what their options are for the 21-22 school year. So this is just kind of a preview, not necessarily a discussion item tonight, but just getting you prepared for that. And that's all for the reopening part of the agenda.
Thank you, Dr. Snell and Doug and Dr. Williams for those updates. And I believe now we'll move on to item 9A, the superintendent's report. So I will turn it back over to you.
I'm back again. So I just have one slide for you tonight. Well, actually, we have the information because we are doing a site visit. We want to make sure we got this in here. I know how much you guys appreciate that, being able to see these plans in action and watching all these countermeasures in effect. And so we wanted to take you through all K-12. And so looking at Woodburn, Camp High, and then Liberty Middle School. So if you're thinking about questions or things in particular that you would like to see, it would be helpful for Dr. Williams and Doug to know that ahead of time. So, and then the next slide is the legislative update. So we do have an adopted budget, which is great news, no special session. Now our job is to go through that budget and determine the impact for us as a district. Just so far, it's really difficult to know exactly the dollar amount and what that means. But we'll get that in the next couple days. Usually what happens is the budget gets released and then all the agencies look at that and analyze the budget and determine for all 295 school districts, what does that actually mean in terms of more funding, less funding, the same. Some high points that I wanted to call your attention to. Transportation looks very different this year. And the formulas are based on the number of students you transport, and so the legislature came up with a solution for how to kind of deal with that, because if you cut all your bus drivers and everybody comes back next year, it doesn't work, right? So they recognize that there needed to be some stabilization. And so they're looking at the 2 years, 1920 and 2021, whatever that funding source was, and then dividing that by 2 to get your next year's. And then looking at, some districts, there are only a couple that actually generated more revenue this year than last year, and so they weren't going to penalize those districts either. So more to come on that, but that's good news. The next one is school funding stabilization. So districts lost enrollment as a result, and so they are looking at trying to capture that enrollment back. We're staffed at that certain level, and if those students stop coming to school, we're still going to have that staffing. And so they're looking at a metric to do that. In addition, they're also looking to offset the discrepancy between federal funding and lack of federal funding for some districts. Like ours was in that situation. I think we talked about like a Longview that has a similar size school district is receiving about $4,400 per student, and we're at $350 per student. So it's a pretty big difference, and so the state was looking at how to potentially offset the cost of COVID for districts, and so that found its way in. And as you mentioned, we'll do the calculations on that. We have a budget committee meeting on Thursday night, and so hopefully by that time we'll have a better idea, and then we can share that information with you as well. So that's all I have for the superintendent report. Jason's going to touch on that with the budget report as well, but happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Dr. Snell. And is the budget committee recorded? So we can watch it later.
Sometimes it is, but it's not a public recording because we honestly want really valid, we don't want anybody pulling punches in their feedback in that meeting, and so there's a lot of trust in the meeting that, I can say I really question this and not have it be taken as I don't value that program. And so we really try to honor the participants there so that they can come, but we can figure out how to share that information with the board.
Great, thank you. Next we'll move on to item B, the monthly budget report by Jason.
Okay. Thank you. Get to the next slide, please. Yes, we're going to give a budget update status report for the month of March. Get us caught up and give you an update on enrollment. And maybe I'll add a couple of things about legislative session a little bit too, tag on to with some things that Jeff mentioned. So, next slide, please. So, we've been monitoring this year. It's such an unusual year, and so I've never been so thankful to have Matt Campbell, our budget analyst. I will say this, wise investment this year, huge. He's just come up huge as we've been having to monitor from one month to the next whether or not our expectations for the year are going to come to fruition or not. And you may recall, I've tried to kind of summarize what sort of deficit we might be facing at the end of the year. And that number has fluctuated from one month to the next. It's a little bit better than last month. Last month, I think I reported about $4.5 million deficit, down to about 4.1. There's several different things that came into play with that. Some revenues have ramped up in community ed, which is great, right? Some of Mary's programs are able to get rolling. Also, some of our expenditure trends that we were anticipating on filling some positions has not happened, which is not good from an operational standpoint. We need bus drivers or we need, food service workers, but if those positions are not filled timely, then those expenditures get delayed, another month. So there's some of those things that are in play this year that make, not only is it just unusual, right, with our transitions for our students, but it's really affecting our expenditure patterns. On the as far as the other funds, really not much to report. Fairly normal activity. We see, obviously on the capital side, Garber's in full gear, and so that's really kind of the activity centered there. And we're really in between debt service payments, which we do in December and June. We'll start to see in this next month property taxes, right? There's been a slight uptick, obviously, in revenues there in the month of March, but April is another big month for property tax collections. that will affect all of our funds for the most part. And then obviously ASB is just very limited activity. But hopefully that will continue to ramp up and certainly be hopefully going full-fledged next year. Next slide, please. So the following graph, again, these are what we've shared in the past, but really to kind of the focus here on this is just kind of those bars, how it just kind of starts to kind of flatten out and decline slightly. These are our revenues for the past 5 years, and kind of a year-to-date model as well as per month, for the respective month of March. And you can kind of see that trend flattening out or declining, as I had mentioned previously, or in previous meetings. Next slide, please. Similar with expenditures, but not to the same degree. And so that's why we're headed towards a bit of a deficit for this year. Next slide, please. And I want to have like a magnifying glass for you. I apologize. Again, as you're reading on either online or on your laptops there, you can kind of see the gray box kind of on the left-hand side. That's where the little over $4 million deficit is highlighted there. So, and we're expected to end the year still with a positive fund balance, obviously, but we would dip into it, projected as is. Keep in mind, this is before the legislative budget that just dropped, right? So this will change, and our projections will change this next month, which we'll be happy to provide you. We are expecting some state stabilization dollars to affect this fiscal year as well as next fiscal year. And that's good, right? This will, that deficit of $4 million should be smaller. I don't think it'll go away. I don't think we're in line to get necessarily maybe that much funds, but let's just kind of hold tight until we get some more information. And we also kind of have to see how the rest of the year plays out. We do our best to project as accurate as possible, but sometimes it is difficult. Next slide, please. On the enrollment side, great news. April, this month, is the first month where we saw basic ed enrollment actually increase. We have been declining throughout the year. So this is a good sign. I think this is hopefully a sign that our efforts to reopen our schools are being received by some families coming back, I hope. You've also heard reports from the city. The development activity is high. So, and we're coming into the nicer weather time frame where, houses will be complete. There was a great weather this spring, great weather, in the past month or so, right? It was so dry. That's great for construction. So, we could start to see more people move into the community. So that was very positive news, and we'll continue to monitor that. Obviously, it's so critical to our budget, of course. And that is, for the most part, all I have for you this evening, unless there are questions.
Does the board have any questions for you? No. Thank you, Jason, for that. And I'm sure we'll get an update next month too. We know more about that budget. So thank you for that. Okay, next we'll move on to item 10, quality facilities and resources. Item A is the MOU modifying the water latecomer agreement. You guys have all had a chance to see that, or if you had any questions?
No questions. We'll move for approval of the agreement.
I have no questions, and we move for approval of the memorandum of understanding
Authorizing signature.
I'll second that. Do we have any discussion? All in favor? Aye. That was unanimous. Okay, next we will move on to our last item on the agenda, which is B, the Woodburn Elementary School portable site work final acceptance. If there aren't any questions, I will entertain a motion.
I'll make a motion to approve the final acceptance for the Woodburn Elementary portable site.
Thank you, Corey. Do you want a second?
Second.
Thank you, Connie, for the second. Is there any discussion? Okay, all those in favor?
Aye.
That is unanimous. And that brings us to the end of our regular scheduled meeting. Thank you for sticking with us tonight, and we'll see you back here in 2 weeks.